There is a silence in the world that is different from the quiet of the night or the stillness of a winter morning. It is a heavy, unnatural silence, the kind that settles over a room when a conversation stops abruptly, or the feeling in a house when the occupants have left for a journey from which they will never return. We often think of history as a slow, grinding process, a river that erodes mountains over millions of years, or the gradual rise and fall of empires that fade like the setting sun. We imagine civilizations declining slowly, crumbling under the weight of decadence, or slowly losing ground to their neighbours. But there is another kind of history, a shadowed history, where the timeline does not fade but snaps. There are places on this earth where the story simply stops. Archaeologists call it a collapse, but the stones tell a different, more haunting tale. They speak of a ghost line, a single moment in time where the noise of life, the shouting of merchants, the crying of babies, the chanting of priests was cut off, replaced instantly by the sound of the wind. Tonight we are going to walk along this ghost line. We are going to visit the cities that were not conquered, not destroyed by fire or plague, but simply abandoned. We are going to explore the mystery of the empty table, the tool left mid-strike, the door left ajar. We invite you to close your eyes, to let the noise of your own world fade away, and to step with us into the void left behind by those who vanished in a single day. Let us begin our journey in the thick, suffocating humidity of the Guatemalan jungle. We are travelling back in time to the year 800 AD, to the height of the classic Maya civilization. This was not a primitive society. It was a world of high astronomy, complex mathematics, and sprawling stone cities that rivaled the capitals of Europe. Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque. These were metropolises of tens of thousands of people. The jungle was kept at bay by paved roads, reservoirs, and meticulously cultivated fields. But something happened, something that the glyphs do not explain. We find ourselves standing in the plaza of a city like Yaxchilan or Bonampak. The sun is setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the limestone pyramids. The air is thick with the sound of cicadas, a rising crescendo that usually signals the end of a workday. But there are no workers returning from the maize fields. There is no smoke rising from the hearths. The ball court is empty, the rubber ball resting in the corner where it rolled and stopped, gathering dust for 1,000 years. Walking through the corridors of the royal palace, you feel the immediacy of the departure. It does not look like a city under siege. There are no signs of a great battle in the streets, no mass graves suggesting a sudden plague. Instead, there is a sense of interruption. In some sites, archaeologists have found unfinished carvings, a stone lintel, half carved with the face of a king. The chisel marks fresh, the stone dust still waiting to be swept away. The artist put down his tool to take a break, or to look at the sky, and never picked it up again. What calls a whole people away? What summons a civilization into the forest? The theories are many: drought, warfare, political collapse, but none of them fully explain the eerie suddenness of the abandonment in certain centres. It is as if a signal was given, a frequency heard only by them, and they dropped everything. The jungle, patient and relentless, began to creep back in the moment the last sandal left the pavement. Vines reached out like green fingers to strangle the stele. Roots pried apart the stones of the temples. But underneath the overgrowth, the city remains frozen, a snapshot of a Tuesday or a Friday that lasted for centuries. The silence here is green and heavy. It is the silence of a secret kept by the trees. Walking here, you expect to turn a corner and bump into a priest or a farmer, but there is only the moss and the jaguar, prowling the empty throne rooms. Drifting north from the tropics, we cross the Gulf of Mexico and fly over the arid deserts of the American Southwest. The landscape changes from green to red, from claustrophobic canopy to endless open sky. We are heading to Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, near the center of the ancestral Puebloan world. Here, in the middle of a harsh desert, these people built monumental great houses. Pueblo Bonito, Chetroquetl, these were immense complexes. Cities of stone with hundreds of rooms, rising 4 or 5 stories high. They were master architects, aligning their walls with the solstices and the movements of the moon. They built wide, straight roads that stretched for miles to connect their communities. For 300 years, this was a hub of culture, trade, and spirituality. Turquoise from the south, shells from the ocean, macaws from the jungle, all found their way here. And then, around 1150 AD, the heartbeat stopped. Walk with me into the ruins of Pueblo Bonito under the light of a full moon. The walls glow with a pale, ghostly luminescence. The windows, dark squares against the stone, look like empty eyes. The abandonment here is even more puzzling than in the Maya lands. In some of the cliff dwellings of the region, like those at Mesa Verde, which were abandoned shortly after, the signs of departure are chillingly casual. Archaeologists have found granaries full of corn, sealed and ready for a winter that the owners never spent there. Pottery bowls have been found sitting by the hearth, mugs waiting to be filled. It wasn't a slow decline where people packed up their valuables and moved on. It looks like they just stood up and walked away. Why would you leave your food? Why would you leave your tools? Why would you walk away from the home your ancestors built, the home that protected you from the burning sun and the freezing wind? The Navajo people, who came later, call them the Anasazi, the ancient ones or ancient enemies. And they avoid these ruins, sensing a lingering spiritual heaviness. The wind whistles through the canyon, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. It rattles the dry grasses growing in the kivas, the circular ceremonial chambers dug into the earth. The kivas were the point of connection between the people and the underworld, the place of emergence. Did the spirits tell them to leave? Did the climate turn against them so fiercely that the land itself rejected them? There is a theory of the Great Drought, but drought is a slow killer. It gives you time to pack. This feels different. This feels like a decision made in a single council meeting, a collective agreement to sever the tie with the place. We are done here, we go now. The uniformity of the exit suggests a social cohesion that is hard for us to understand. We are individuals. They were a single organism. When the head moved, the body followed. Standing in the silent plaza of Pueblo Bonito, you feel the weight of that decision. You feel the ghost of the crowd, the echo of the last footsteps fading down the Great North Road, leaving the magnificent stone shell to the silence of the desert. Let us travel across the ocean now, to a different desert, to the sands of Pakistan and the Indus Valley. We are visiting Mohenjo-Daro, the Mound of the Dead. This city, flourishing around 2500 BC, was a marvel of urban planning. It had a grid system, a complex sewage network, public baths, and standardized weights and measures. It was a civilization of order, of cleanliness, of peace. There are no great palaces or temples here, no monuments to tyrant kings. Just a vast, well-ordered city of brick. And then the ghost line was drawn. The city was not just abandoned. It seems to have been depopulated in a way that terrified early excavators. The streets of Mohenjo-Daro are wide and straight, flanked by high brick walls. Walking them at night, the shadows are sharp and deep. The air is dry and dusty. In the early excavations, bodies were found lying in the streets. Not buried in graves, but lying where they fell, a family holding hands, a man shielding his face. For decades, this was interpreted as an Aryan invasion, a sudden massacre, but modern science tells a stranger story. There are no weapon marks on the bones. There is no layer of ash from a burning city. The bodies accumulated over time, perhaps, or represent a final desperate moment that wasn't war. But the city itself died. The wells were filled in. The houses were subdivided. The order broke down. And then silence. Did the river Indus change its course, leaving them without water? Did a tectonic event shift the landscape? Or was it something more subtle, a failure of the ideology that held the city together? The bricks of Mohenjo-Daro are red, fired in kilns. They are uniform, millions of them. They speak of a society that valued conformity and equality. To see such a place empty is jarring. It looks like a modern suburb that has been neutron bombed. The structure remains, but the life is gone. You can walk into the Great Bath, a massive watertight pool made of bitumen-sealed brick. You can imagine the priests or the citizens bathing here in ritual purity. The water is gone, the bitumen is cracked, but the space holds the memory of the water. The silence of Mohenjo-Daro is a dusty silence, a silence of forgotten purpose. It asks the question, what happens when a society that is perfectly ordered suddenly loses its centre? Does it dissolve into chaos, or does it simply evaporate into the desert air? The wind blowing from the Thar Desert erodes the bricks grain by grain, erasing the record of the people who vanished, leaving only the skeleton of their order behind. Our journey takes us further west, to the rocky coast of the Mediterranean, to the island of Crete. We stand at the palace of Knossos, but we are looking past the colourful frescoes and the restored columns. We are looking for the moment the Minoan civilization ended. For centuries they ruled the seas. They were a thalassocracy, a culture of trade, art and bull-leaping. They had no defensive walls around their palaces because their navy was their wall. They lived in luxury, with plumbing and light wells and intricate art. And then, around 1450 BC, fire swept across the island. Not just one palace, but all of them, Phaistos, Malea, Zakros, all burned at roughly the same time. Was it the eruption of Thera, Santorini, that weakened them? A massive tsunami that wiped out their fleet? Perhaps. But the fires came later. The ghost line here is marked by ash. Imagine standing in the throne room of Knossos. The griffins painted on the wall are watching. The stone throne, the oldest in Europe, sits empty. The alabaster bowl on the floor is dry. The panic of that final day is baked into the clay tablets. We have found tablets that were being written when the fire struck, lists of goods, administrative details, baked hard by the flames that destroyed the archive. It is a snapshot of bureaucracy interrupted by catastrophe. 10 jars of oil, 5 sheep, 3, and then nothing. The scribe dropped the stylus. The smoke filled the room. The civilization that loved beauty and flowers and dancing was extinguished like a candle. But unlike the slow decline of Rome, the Minoans seemed to vanish into the mist of myth. They became the stories of Atlantis, the legends of the labyrinth. Walking the ruins today, amidst the smell of pine and the sound of cicadas, you feel the ghost of a golden age that was snatched away. The stone is warm to the touch. The pithoi, the giant storage jars, still stand in the magazines, some still blackened by the ancient fire. It is a tragic silence, a silence of beauty interrupted. It reminds us that sophistication is no armour against disaster. The sea that brought them wealth also brought their doom, or perhaps the invaders who took advantage of their weakness. But the suddenness remains. One day ships were sailing, artists were painting, bulls were leaping. The next day, smoke rose from every headland, signalling the end of a world. We fly north now to the cold, misty waters of the North Atlantic, to the settlements of the Vikings in Greenland, the eastern and western settlements. For nearly 500 years, the Norse lived here, on the edge of the known world. They built stone churches, kept cattle, traded walrus ivory with Europe. They were tough, resilient people, and then, in the 15th century, they vanished. The last written record is a wedding in the church of Falsey in 1408. After that, only silence. When ships finally returned to Greenland centuries later, they found the stone houses standing, the roofs fallen in, but no people. The Inuit recalled stories of the Kavdlunait disappearing. Did they starve as the climate cooled during the Little Ice Age? Did they pack up and sail to America or back to Iceland, dying in the waves? Or did they simply die out, one by one, until the last person looked out over the fjord and closed their eyes? Stand in the ruins of the Falsey church. The stone walls are thick, built to withstand the Arctic winter. The windows look out onto the grey churning sea. The grass grows tall in the nave. It is a lonely, desolate place. The silence here is cold and biting. It is the silence of isolation. You can feel the desperation of the final years, the creeping cold, the shrinking herds, the ships that stopped coming. The ghost line here is a line of ice. It is a slow fade that ended in a sudden void. The last fire went out, the last cow died, and the silence of the Arctic reclaimed the land. There is a profound sadness in these stones, a testament to the limit of human endurance. They pushed the boundary of where life could exist, and the boundary pushed back. We move now to the deserts of North Africa, to the lush green mystery of the Garamantes, a civilization in the middle of the Sahara. They built complex underground irrigation channels called fergaras to mine fossil water from deep beneath the sand. They built castles in the desert. They traded with the Romans. They were masters of the oasis, but when the water ran out, the ghost line appeared. Visit the ruins of Garama, Jerma in Libya. The stone walls crumble into the sand. The wind howls through the empty windows. This was a civilization built on a finite resource. They were mining water like we mine oil. When the water table dropped below the level of their tunnels, the city died instantly. You cannot survive a week in the Sahara without water. The abandonment must have been absolute. One day the water flowed, the next a trickle, the next dust. The people had to scatter, becoming nomads again, leaving their stone cities to be swallowed by the dunes. Walking here, you are walking on the fragility of resource management. The silence is a dry, thirsty silence. It is a warning from the past about the dependence on things that can disappear. The sand is reclaiming everything, burying the walls, erasing the history, turning the great capital into just another dune in the endless sea of sand. Finally, for this first part of our journey, let us go to the jungles of Southeast Asia, to the sprawling city of Angkor in Cambodia, the largest pre-industrial city in the world, a hydraulic city, a water world of canals, reservoirs, berets, and temples. Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom, Taprom. 1 million people lived here, and in the 15th century the kings left. The population dispersed. The jungle took over with a ferocity that is famous. The roots of the silk cotton trees flowed over the walls like melted wax. The faces of the bodhisattvas were covered in moss. Why leave a paradise? The water system failed. A series of mega-droughts followed by intense monsoons broke the delicate infrastructure of the canals. The city, which relied on water control, drowned in its own complexity. The ghost line here is wet and green. It is the sound of a dam breaking. Walking through Tarprom, where the trees hold the stones in a deadly embrace, you feel the power of nature returning. The city wasn't destroyed by war, though wars happened. It was abandoned because it stopped working. The complex machine of the city seized up. The silence of Angkor is not quiet. It is full of the sounds of the forest, but the human voice is missing. The stone faces of the Bayans smile enigmatically, guarding a kingdom of ghosts. They watch the people leave, filing out along the causeways, leaving the gold and the stone behind for the monkeys and the birds. It is a majestic, humid silence, a reminder that even the gods cannot hold back the forest forever. The ghost line is everywhere. It is a thread that runs through history, stitching together the moments when humanity blinked and vanished. As we end this first part of our exploration, let the image of these empty cities settle in your mind. The open doors, the cold hearths, the silence. They are not just ruins, they are echoes of a sudden departure, waiting for us to listen to the story of why they left. The smile of the Bayon faces in Angkor fades into the emerald gloom of the jungle, leaving us with the sensation of being watched by stone eyes that have seen the passing of an age. We step back from the humid embrace of Cambodia and let our consciousness drift across the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, heading westward. We are searching for a silence that is drier, sharper, a silence born of wind and rock. We find ourselves hovering over the arid landscape of Turkey, but not the Turkey of bustling bazaars or coastal resorts. We are deep in the Anatolian plateau, heading towards the ancient Hittite capital of Hattusa. Here the ghost line is marked by a deliberate act. The city was not conquered in a chaotic siege, it was dismantled. Around 1200 BC, during the mysterious Bronze Age collapse, the Hittite Empire, a superpower that rivaled Egypt, simply evaporated. Walk with me through the Lion Gate. The stone lions, with their mouths open in a silent roar, still guard the entrance, but they guard nothing but grass and wind. The royal archives found here tell us of a kingdom in turmoil, famine, internal strife. But the archaeology tells us something stranger. The city was evacuated. The temples were emptied of their statues and treasures. The royal family packed up the administration and left. Only after they were gone did the fires start, perhaps set by the Kaskian tribes sweeping down from the north, or perhaps by the last few residents left behind to close the door. Imagine the procession leaving the city. The carts loaded with gold, with clay tablets, with the gods themselves, the dust rising in the afternoon sun, the silence falling over the great citadel as the last chariot rumbled away. Walking the ramparts of Hattusa today, the wind is the only constant. It howls through the tunnels of the Sphinx Gate. The green stone in the great temple reflects the empty sky. It is a hollow silence. A silence of a shell, left behind by a creature that moved on. Where did they go? Some say they established new, smaller kingdoms in the south. Others say they melted into the populations of the Levant. But the great centralized power, the empire of iron and chariots, vanished in a single season. The ghost line here is the line of a carefully planned exit, a strategic withdrawal from history that left only the heavy, polygonal stones to puzzle the future. We move south now, crossing the border into the Levant, to the site of Hazor in Israel. This was the largest biblical-era city in the region, the head of all those kingdoms. In the 13th century BC, it too met a sudden end. We stand in the remains of the Canaanite palace. The walls are blackened, the mud bricks baked into ceramic by an intense heat. This was a destruction of biblical proportions, quite literally. But look closer at the idols. The statues of the gods and kings had been defaced, their heads chopped off, their hands severed. This was not just a military conquest, it was an ideological purge. And then the site was abandoned for centuries. The ghost line here is violent and abrupt. The ash layer is thick. Standing in the ruins, you can almost smell the smoke. You can feel the anger that tore this city apart. But after the fire, there was no rebuilding, just the silence of the tell, the artificial mound created by the ruin. The wind blows dust from the Jezreel Valley over the broken stones. It is a heavy, judgmental silence, a silence that says, "This place is cursed." The people who lived here, the Canaanites with their complex pantheon and the rich trade, were erased, their culture buried under a blanket of ash and time. We drift further south to the desert of Jordan, to the rose-red city of Petra. We visited its stones before, but now we look at its end. Petra flourished as the capital of the Nabateans, a wealthy trading hub controlling the incense routes. But by the 7th century AD, it was largely a ghost town. What happened? An earthquake in 363 AD destroyed many buildings and crippled the vital water management system. The trade routes shifted to the sea. The city bled life slowly, yes, but there came a point of final departure. Walk down the colonnaded street at twilight. The shadows of the broken pillars stretch long across the paving stones. The great temple stands in ruin. The Bedouin campfires flickered in the caves for centuries. But the city itself, the administration, the priesthood, the merchants, vanished. The ghost line here is seismic. The earth shook, the cisterns cracked, and the desert reclaimed its own. Without water, Petra is just beautiful rock. The silence here is majestic, amplified by the towering canyon walls. It is a silence of resignation. The city realized it could no longer fight the desert and the shifting economics of the world, and so it went to sleep, tucked away in its rocky cradle, hidden from Western eyes for 1,000 years. We cross the Red Sea into Egypt, but we travel far to the west to the Siwa oasis near the Libyan border. Here lies the fortress of Shali, built of kershef, chunks of salt and mud. It looks like a melting sandcastle. For centuries it was a thriving hub, safe behind its high walls. But in 1926 it rained, a rare torrential downpour in the desert. The salt in the bricks dissolved. The city literally melted. The inhabitants had to flee their dissolving homes in a single terrifying night. The roofs collapsed, the walls turned to sludge. Walk through the ruins of Shali today. It is a labyrinth of melted mud, a surreal organic landscape. It looks like a city made of wax that was left too close to the fire. The ghost line here is meteorological, a freak weather event that erased a fortress in hours. The silence is eerie, broken by the crunch of salt underfoot. You're walking on the remains of walls that stood for 700 years, undone by the one thing that gives life: water. It is a paradox of the desert, a reminder that nature has weapons we cannot anticipate. We fly north, crossing the Mediterranean to the boot of Italy. We go to the region of Basilicata, to the ghost town of Krakow. Perched on a steep summit for defensive reasons, Krakow stood for 1,000 years. It survived plagues, bandits and wars. But in the 20th century, the ground began to move. Landslides triggered by infrastructure work and sewage leaks made the town unstable. In 1963, the order was given: evacuate. The entire population was moved to the valley below. Krakow was left empty. Walk the medieval streets today. The houses are still there, doors hanging off hinges, furniture rotting inside. A donkey stands in a living room. A calendar on the wall marks a date in 1963. It is a modern ghost town, a time capsule of post-war Italy. The ghost line here is bureaucratic and geological. The slide was slow, but the departure was absolute. The silence of Cracow is filled with the flapping of pigeons and the creaking of shutters. It is a cinematic silence. Indeed, many movies are filmed here. But beneath the drama lies the tragedy of a community uprooted, looking up from the valley at their ancestral homes crumbling on the hilltop. We travel north to the Alps, to the village of Curon in South Tyrol. Here, the ghost line is a line of water. In 1950, a dam was built to create a reservoir for hydroelectric power. The village of Curon stood in the way. Despite the protests of the villagers, the valley was flooded. The town was submerged. Today, only the 14th century bell tower rises from the waters of Lake Ressia. It is a surreal sight. In winter, when the lake freezes, you can walk out to the tower. The rest of the village, the houses, the barns, the streets, lies deep beneath the dark, cold water. The bells were removed before the flood, but legend says you can still hear them ringing on winter nights. The silence here is a submerged silence. The village is still there, preserved in the cold, but it is a world away, accessible only to the fish. It is a ghost town created by progress, by the need for electricity, a sacrifice of the past for the future. We fly west to the British Isles, to the windswept archipelago of St Kilda, 40 miles west of the Outer Hebrides. This is the edge of the world. For 2,000 years, a small community lived here, surviving on seabirds and sheep, cut off from the mainland by storms for months at a time. But the modern world slowly encroached. Tourism, disease, and the realization that there was an easier life elsewhere eroded their resolve. In 1930, the remaining 36 islanders petitioned the government to be evacuated. On August 29th, 1930, they left. They left their homes, their sheep, their way of life. They left an open Bible in each house and a pile of oats on the floor. The ghost line here is a line of sorrow. It was the death of a unique culture. Walk down the single street of Village Bay. The stone cleats, storehouses, still stand, hundreds of them, dotting the hills like strange beehives. The wind screams off the Atlantic. The cry of the gannets and puffins is deafening, but the human voice is gone. The silence of St Kilda is a loud, elemental silence. It is the silence of a battle lost against isolation. The island feels abandoned, not just by people, but by time itself. It is a place where humanity held on by its fingertips for millennia, only to let go in the end. We cross the Atlantic again to the jungles of Panama. We are looking for the lost colony of Darien. In the late 1690s, Scotland tried to establish a colony here, Caledonia, to control the trade routes. It was a disaster. Disease, Spanish attacks, and poor planning decimated the settlers. In 1700, the survivors fled. The colony was abandoned. The jungle reclaimed the fort, the huts, the graves. Today, there is almost nothing left to see. The ghost line here is a line of fever and failure. It broke the economy of Scotland and led to the Act of Union with England. An entire nation's dream vanished in the mosquito-infested swamps of Darien. The silence here is humid and buzzing. The trees grow over the dreams of empire. It is a reminder that the map is not the territory, and that ambition is no defence against biology. We travel north to the United States, to the town of Centralia, Pennsylvania. This is a ghost town still burning. In 1962, a fire started in a coal mine beneath the town. It ignited the anthracite seam. It has been burning ever since. The ground grew hot. Smoke rose from cracks in the earth. Sinkholes opened up, swallowing backyards. Slowly, the town was condemned. The federal government paid people to leave. Houses were bulldozed. The zip code was revoked. Today, Centralia is a grid of empty streets overgrown with weeds. Smoke still curls up from the ground, smelling of sulphur. The ghost line here is infernal, a fire that cannot be put out. A few die-hard residents remain, refusing to leave, living in a town that officially does not exist. The silence of Centralia is a smoky, toxic silence. It is the real-life inspiration for Silent Hill. The fire burns beneath your feet, a slow-motion catastrophe that has erased a community from the surface of the earth. We fly to the Ukraine, to the city of Pripyat, the most famous ghost town of the modern age. On April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear reactor exploded. Pripyat, a model Soviet city of 50,000 people, was sleeping. The next day, the evacuation began. For 3 days, they were told, they left their pets, their photos, their dinner on the table. They never returned. Walking through Pripyat is walking through the apocalypse. The Ferris wheel in the amusement park, which was due to open days later, stands yellow and rusting against the grey sky. Bumper cars sit covered in moss. Schoolbooks are scattered on classroom floors. Dolls sit on windowsills staring out at the radioactive forest. The ghost line here is invisible. It is the radiation, the silent killer. The city is frozen in 1986. Soviet propaganda posters still hang on the walls. The silence of Pripyat is a heavy, unnatural silence. The birds sing, the trees grow, but the place feels wrong. It is a monument to our technological hubris. It is a ghost city of concrete and glass, a warning of how quickly our modern world can be rendered uninhabitable. We travel east to the Aral Sea, to the island of Vozrojdenia, once a top-secret Soviet bioweapons testing facility. Dangerous pathogens were tested here. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the staff left. They buried the anthrax in pits and departed. The island was abandoned in 1992. As the Aral Sea dried up due to irrigation projects, the island became a peninsula, connecting it to the mainland. The ghost line here is biological. The buildings, laboratories, barracks, canteens are looted and crumbling. The wind blows toxic dust across the salt flats. It is one of the deadliest places on Earth, yet it is open to the sky. The silence here is a terrified silence. It is the silence of a secret that was buried but not dead. It is a place where the ghosts are microscopic, waiting in the soil. Finally, for this second part, we go to the coast of Japan, to Hashima Island or Gunkanjima, Battleship Island, a tiny island that was a coal mining facility. At its peak, it was the most densely populated place on Earth. High-rise concrete apartments were crammed onto the rock. But when petroleum replaced coal in the 1970s, the mine closed. In 1974, the island was abandoned. In a matter of weeks, everyone left. The boat took them away, leaving the concrete battleship to rot in the ocean. Today it looks like a post-apocalyptic ruin. The sea walls are battered by typhoons. The apartments are crumbling, revealing the intimate lives of the miners. TV sets, sewing machines, shoes left in the Genkan. The ghost line here is economic. The resource ran out or became obsolete, and the colony was terminated. The silence of Gunkanjima is the sound of waves crashing against concrete. It is a grey industrial silence. It shows us the future of our cities if we were to vanish. Concrete skeletons picked clean by the wind and the salt, standing defiant against the sea until they inevitably fall. From the burning mines of Pennsylvania to the radioactive apartments of Pripyat, the ghost line is drawn by fire, by ice, by invisible forces. These places remind us that permanence is an illusion. Our cities are fragile shells. inhabited only as long as the water flows, the air is clean, and the ground is stable. When the conditions change, we leave, and the silence moves in to take our place. The grey concrete silence of Hashima Island fades into the mist of the Sea of Japan, and we allow our spirit to drift away from the industrial decay of the modern world. We travel back across the continents, back through the centuries, seeking a different kind of ghost town, one not preserved by isolation, but by a sudden, violent embrace of the earth itself. We find ourselves in the Bay of Naples, Italy, in the year 79 AD. The mountain Vesuvius has been silent for centuries, a green and fertile peak where vineyards grow, and then the ghost line is drawn in fire and ash. We are, of course, visiting Pompeii and Herculaneum. This is the archetype of the interrupted moment. It is the most complete snapshot of antiquity we possess, bought at the terrible price of thousands of lives. Walk through the streets of Pompeii today. The stone pavements are rutted by the wheels of Roman chariots. The stepping stones allow you to cross the street without dirtying your sandals, but the noise of the city, the shouting of the fishmongers, the political campaigning, the barking of dogs was silenced in a matter of hours. The ash fell like snow, burying everything, sealing the city in an airtight vault. This is not a ruin that crumbled slowly. It is a city that was flash frozen. We find bread still in the ovens, carbonized but recognizable, with the baker's stamp still visible. We find lentils in the bowl, ready to be cooked. We find the "Beware of the Dog" mosaic in the entryway, but the dog itself is gone, or rather, its form is preserved in the plaster cast of the void it left behind, twisted in its final struggle against the fumes. The silence of Pompeii is a crowded silence. You are surrounded by the invisible presence of the people who lived here. You walk into the House of the Faun, or the Villa of the Mysteries, and the frescoes are still bright, reds, yellows and blues that have not seen the sun for nearly 2,000 years. It is an intimate abandonment. You feel like an intruder in someone's private life. In Herculaneum, the preservation is even more startling. The pyroclastic surge was so hot it carbonized wood instantly. We see wooden doors, beds, even a cradle turn to charcoal, but keeping their shape. We see the library of the Villa of the Papyri, with hundreds of scrolls waiting to be read. The ghost line here is the line of the surge, the exact moment the clock stopped. It reminds us that we live on a restless planet, and that our daily routines, our baking, our writing, our sleeping, are carried out by the permission of the geology beneath our feet. We leave the shadow of the volcano and cross the Atlantic Ocean to the high valley of Mexico. We are travelling to a time before the Aztecs, to the city of Teotihuacan, the place where men become gods. When the Aztecs found this city in the 1400s, it was already a ruin, overgrown and abandoned for centuries. They were so awed by its scale that they believed giants had built it. But who really built it? And where did they go? The city flourished between 100 BC and 650 AD. It was a metropolis of over 100,000 people, with wide avenues, apartment compounds, and the massive pyramids of the sun and moon. Walk down the Avenue of the Dead in the silence of the early morning. The scale is overwhelming. The Pyramid of the Sun rises like a man-made mountain, but the city has no written history that we can read. We don't know the names of its kings. We don't know its original name. And we don't know why, in the 7th century, the city was systematically burned and abandoned. The elite areas were torched, the statues smashed. Was it an internal uprising, a revolution against a rigid theocracy, or a climate shift that dried up the valley? The ghost line here is a line of smoke and mystery. The people didn't just leave. They tried to erase the power of the city before they went. They dismantled the soul of the place. Walking the empty avenue, you feel the vacuum left by a superpower that vanished. The Aztecs used it as a stage for their own myths, but the original actors had long since exited the stage, leaving only the colossal set design behind. The silence of Teotihuacan is a cosmic silence, a geometry of stone aligned with the stars, waiting for a priesthood that never returned. We fly north, following the spine of the continent, to the fertile floodplains of the Mississippi River in the United States. Near modern-day St. Louis, we find Cahokia. In 1100 AD, this was larger than London or Paris. It was the greatest city north of Mexico, a complex of 120 earthen mounds, dominated by Monk's Mound, a terraced pyramid of soil that covers 14 acres. The city bustled with trade, games of chunky and astronomical observatories made of cedar posts known as Woodhenge, and then by 1350 AD it was empty. The great plaza, once packed with thousands of people for ceremonies, was silent. The wooden palisade walls rotted away. The grass grew over the mounds. Why? The theories range from deforestation and flooding to disease and social unrest. The ghost line here is soft and organic. There are no stone ruins, only the shapes of the earth. The city dissolved back into the landscape. Standing on top of Monk's Mound, looking out over the hazy river valley, you feel the ghost of a metropolis. You can almost hear the beat of the drums and the shouts of the crowd, but all that remains is the wind in the tall grass. It is a quiet, earthen silence, a reminder that civilizations built of wood and earth are ephemeral, leaving only their shadows on the ground to prove they were ever there. We travel east across the Atlantic to the rugged coast of Scotland, to the Orkney Islands. We visited the stone circles here before, but now we enter Skara Brae. This is a domestic mystery. It is a Neolithic village, older than the pyramids, buried by a massive storm around 2500 BC. It was preserved in the sand until a storm in 1850 revealed it again. What makes Skara Brae haunting is its intimacy. These were not temples, they were homes. You look down into the stone houses. You see the stone beds, the stone dressers, the central hearth. You see the stone tanks for bait or water. It looks like the family just stepped out. In one house, a necklace of beads was found, dropped in a doorway, as if broken in a haste to leave. Did a catastrophic storm bury the village in a single night, forcing them to flee with only the clothes on their backs? Or was it a slow encroachment of the sand? The layout suggests a tight-knit community, connected by covered passageways. They lived together, worked together, and then they left together. The ghost line here is the sand itself. It filled the rooms, preserving the furniture of people who lived 5,000 years ago. The silence of Skara Brae is a cosy yet chilling silence. It is the silence of a house where the fire has just gone out, leaving the cold to creep in. We fly east to the borderlands between Turkey and Armenia, to the ruined city of Ani, the city of 1001 churches. In the 10th century, this was a capital of the Bagratid Armenian kingdom, a rival to Constantinople. It sat on a triangular plateau protected by a deep ravine. It was a city of splendour, with a cathedral, palaces and massive walls. But history was cruel to Ani. It was sacked by the Seljuks, shaken by earthquakes, and ravaged by the Mongols. By the 18th century, it was completely abandoned. Today, Ani is a romantic, melancholy ruin. The vast grassy plateau is dotted with the skeletons of churches. Some are split in half by lightning or earthquakes, revealing their cross-sections like an anatomical drawing. The Cathedral of Ani stands roofless. its red stone glowing against the green grass, and the snow-capped Mount Ararat in the distance. The bridge over the Akurian River is broken, the two ends reaching out to each other but never touching, one in Turkey, one in Armenia. The ghost line here is a political and seismic fracture. The city lies in a military zone, a no man's land. The silence is profound. It is the silence of a city that was once the centre of the world, now relegated to the very edge of it. The wind blows through the empty arches, singing a requiem for a kingdom that disappeared. It is a beautiful, tragic silence, a painting of glory and decay. We travel southeast to the deserts of India, to the state of Rajasthan. We find the ghost city of Fatehpur Sikri. This was built by the Mughal Emperor Akbar in the late 16th century to be his capital. It is a masterpiece of red sandstone architecture, a blend of Islamic and Hindu styles. It has palaces, mosques, courts and gardens. It was built to be the perfect city, and it was occupied for only 14 years. In 1585, Akbar abandoned it. The primary reason? Water. The local lake dried up, and the splendid city, for all its beauty, could not sustain its population. It remains today almost perfectly preserved, a ghost town of imperial grandeur. Walk through the Diwani Khas, the hall of private audience, with its intricate central pillar. Walk through the empty harems and the silent courtyards. It does not look ruined. It looks like the court is away on a hunting trip and will return any minute. But they never returned. The ghost line here is a line of thirst. It is a monument to the arrogance of building a city in a place where nature did not want one. The silence of Fatehpur Sikri is a regal silence. It is a stage without actors, a palace without a king, waiting in the heat of the Indian sun. We cross to the Indian Ocean, to the southern tip of Africa, to the Namib Desert in Namibia. We are visiting Kolmanskop. In 1908, a diamond was found here in the sand. A rush began. A German town sprang up in the middle of the desert, complete with a ballroom, a theatre, a casino, an ice factory, and the first X-ray station in the southern hemisphere. It was a bubble of European luxury in the wasteland. But the diamonds ran out. Or rather, richer deposits were found further south. The town was abandoned in 1956. Since then, the desert has been reclaiming Kolmanskop. The sand dunes have moved into the houses. Walk into the hospital or the schoolmaster's house. The doors are jammed open by sand. The floors are covered in knee-deep drifts of sand. The wallpaper is peeling, revealing the lath and plaster. The light in these rooms is extraordinary. The sun reflecting off the sand creates a golden, diffused glow. It is a surreal dreamscape. The ghost line here is the dune. The desert did not destroy the town. It simply swallowed it. The silence is muffled by the sand. It is a soft, shifting silence. It shows us that nature abhors a vacuum. If we leave a space empty, the earth will fill it. We cross the Atlantic to the coast of North Carolina in the USA. We travel to Roanoke Island, the lost colony. In 1587, over 100 English settlers established a colony here. Their leader, John White, sailed back to England for supplies. He was delayed by the war with Spain and didn't return until 1590. When he landed, the colony was gone. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle. The houses had been dismantled, not destroyed. The only clue was the word Croatoan carved into a fence post and CRO carved into a tree. The ghost line here is a linguistic riddle. Did they move to Croatoan Island, now Hatteras, to live with the local Native Americans? Were they killed? Did they try to sail home and drown? The mystery has never been fully solved. Standing on the shores of Roanoke, Looking out at the dark waters of the Sound, you feel the anxiety of the unknown. It is the silence of a missing person case that has gone cold for 400 years. It is the archetype of the sudden vanish, the story that haunts the history of the New World. We fly west to the Sierra Nevada mountains in California to the town of Bodie. This is the classic Wild West ghost town. In the late 1800s, it was a booming gold rush town with 10,000 people and 65 saloons. It was known for its wickedness, its gunfights, and its gold. But when the gold ran out, the people left. By the 1940s, it was a ghost town. Bodie is preserved in a state of arrested decay. It has not been restored, but it is protected. You can look through the windows of the houses and see tables set for dinner, bottles on the bar, dust-covered pool tables. It looks as if the rapture happened. The ghost line here is the boom and bust cycle. It captures the frantic energy of the gold rush and the sudden stillness that follows when the vein runs dry. The silence of Bodie is the silence of the wind creaking through old wood. It is the silence of the high desert, reclaiming the shacks and the shops, bleaching the wood to the colour of bone. We travel south to the Atacama Desert in Chile, the driest place on earth. We visit the saltpeter works of Humberstone and Santa Laura. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, these were thriving company towns, extracting white gold, nitrate, for fertilizer and explosives. Thousands of workers lived here in the harsh desert. But with the invention of synthetic nitrate in Germany, the industry collapsed. By 1960, the towns were abandoned. The dry air has preserved them perfectly. The theatre still has its seats. The swimming pool, made of cast iron from a ship, is empty and rusting. The machinery stands silent like the skeletons of giant iron dinosaurs. The sun beats down relentlessly. The ghost line here is technological. An invention in a laboratory in Europe destroyed a city in the desert of Chile. The silence of Humberstone is a metallic silence. The wind whistles through the corrugated iron roofs, creating a ghostly music. It is a place of rust and dust, a monument to the industrial age's fragility. Finally, for this third part, we go to the island of Cyprus, to the resort district of Varosha in the city of Famagusta. In the early 1970s, this was the Monte Carlo of the Middle East. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton vacationed here. The beaches were lined with high-rise hotels. And then, in 1974, the Turkish invasion happened. The Greek Cypriot population fled, expecting to return in a few days. The Turkish army fenced off the area. For nearly 50 years, Varosha has been a forbidden zone, a ghost city held hostage by politics. The tables are still set for breakfast in the hotels. The car dealerships still have 1974 Toyotas in the windows. The clothes are still hanging in the wardrobes. Nature has taken over. Turtles nest on the empty beaches, and prickly pear cactus grows through the asphalt. The ghost line here is a barbed wire fence. It is a modern city frozen in time, rotting slowly behind a no-entry sign. The silence of Varosha is a tense political silence. It is a silence enforced by soldiers, a reminder that a city can die even while the world watches. From the ash of Pompeii to the sand of Kolmanskop, from the jungle of Teotihuacan to the barbed wire of Varosha, the ghost line takes many forms, but the result is always the same: a sudden stop, a pause that becomes eternal. These places are the pauses in the symphony of humanity, the beats of silence that give the music its meaning. They ask us to consider, what would we leave behind if we had to leave today? What would be the shape of our ghost line? The silence of Varosha, held captive behind its rusted fences, fades into the shimmering heat of the Mediterranean, and we allow our minds to travel once more. We leave the political stalemates of the modern world and drift back to an era where the mysteries were written not in treaties, but in stone. We fly across the Atlantic, heading south towards the high Andes of Peru. We are returning to the misty peaks, but this time to a site that predates the Inca by centuries. We are going to Tiwanaku and its neighbour, Pumapunku. We have touched these stones before in our journey of giants, but now we look at their end. This was the centre of a powerful empire that controlled the Lake Titicaca Basin for 500 years. They were masters of agriculture, creating raised fields called sucacolos that protected crops from frost. They were engineers of the highest order, and then, around 1000 AD, the lights went out. The ghost line here is climatic. Ice cores from the Quelcaya Glacier tell us of a terrifying drought that lasted for decades. The lake levels dropped. The raised fields dried up. The surplus of food that supported the elite, the priests and the stonecutters, vanished. Imagine standing amidst the monolithic gates of Pumapunku. The wind whips across the Altiplano, cold and thin. The great H-blocks lie scattered as if tossed by a giant hand. Was there a revolt? Did the hungry populace turn on the priests who could no longer summon the rain? There are signs of violence, of statues beheaded and smashed. The end of Tiwanaku was not a gentle fading, it was a collapse. The people dispersed into small villages, leaving the great ceremonial centre to the llamas and the wind. The silence here is a high-altitude silence, sharp and clear. It is the silence of a broken promise between the gods and the people. The technology to cut these stones with laser-like precision was lost, forgotten in the struggle for survival. The ghost line is a line of hunger, a reminder that culture is a luxury that rests on the humble foundation of a harvest. We drift north to the dense forests of the Amazon basin. For centuries, Westerners believed the Amazon was a pristine wilderness, incapable of supporting large civilizations. They were wrong. We are looking for the lost cities of the Amazon, the culture of the Terra Preta. Recent scans and deforestation have revealed geoglyphs, vast networks of roads and mounds that suggest millions of people lived here before Columbus. But when the first Europeans arrived, bringing smallpox and influenza, the ghost line swept through the jungle faster than the explorers themselves. The civilization didn't leave stone ruins. They built with wood and earth. When the people died, perhaps 90% of them, the jungle reclaimed their cities in a generation. The ghost line here is invisible and biological. It is a silence that fell over the forest as the villages emptied out. The pristine jungle we see today is actually a garden gone wild, an overgrown cemetery. Walking through the Amazon, you are walking on the composted remains of a lost world. The silence is deceptive. It is teeming with life, but it is the life of the forest, not the life of the cities that once lined the great river. It is a green, breathing silence that hides a tragedy of continental scale. We travel east to the Atlantic Ocean, to the remote island of Roanoke's spiritual cousin, the colony of Vinland. At Lonso Meadows in Newfoundland, the Vikings established a foothold in North America 500 years before Columbus. They built turf houses, a forge, a ship repair station. They stayed for a few years, maybe a decade, and then they left. Why? The sagas tell of conflict with the Skraelings by the indigenous people. They were outnumbered, far from home, and the land was hostile. They packed up their ships and sailed back to Greenland, closing the door on the New World. The ghost line here is a line of retreat. It is a historical what if. What if they had stayed? History would have been rewritten. but they left only the faint outline of their turf walls in the grass. The silence of Lanceau Meadows is a windy coastal silence. It is the silence of a failed experiment, a tentative touch that didn't take hold. The Vikings realized that their reach had exceeded their grasp, and they pulled back into the fog of the north. We crossed the ocean to the deserts of Turkmenistan, to the city of Merv. In the 12th century, this was the largest city in the world, a metropolis on the Silk Road, a hub of learning and trade, known as the Queen of the World. It had a population of 500,000. It had libraries, observatories, and vast irrigation systems. And in 1221, the Ghost Line arrived on horseback. The Mongols under Tolui, son of Genghis Khan, arrived at the gates. The city surrendered, hoping for mercy. There was no mercy. The population was driven out onto the plain and systematically decimated. It is said that each soldier was ordered to ensure the city would never rise again. The irrigation dams were destroyed, turning the oasis back into a desert. Merv never recovered. Walk the ruins of ancient Merv today. It is a vast archaeological park of crumbling mud brick walls, stretching for miles. The mausoleum of Sultan Sanjar stands in the centre, a lonely dome in the wasteland. The silence here is the silence of a graveyard. It is a massacre silence. The scale of the destruction is hard to comprehend. A city that was the New York of its day was turned into dust and bone in a single week. The wind blows the sand over the melted mounds of the citadel. It is a terrifying reminder of the fragility of civilization in the face of total war. Merv is the Ozymandias of cities. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. We fly south to the island of Sri Lanka, to the rock fortress of Sigiriya, which we visited before. But let us look at its abandonment. King Kashyapa built this palace in the sky in the 5th century AD, driven by fear of his brother Moggallana, the rightful heir. He lived in his cloud castle for 18 years. When his brother finally came with an army, Kashyapa descended to fight, was defeated, and met his tragic end. The capital was moved back to Anuradhapura. The sky palace was given to Buddhist monks, and then abandoned. The ghost line here is the death of a tyrant. The city existed only for the ego of one man. When he died, the reason for the city died with him. Walk the empty terraces of the summit. The pool is green with algae. The throne is empty. The silence is the silence of a vanity project that has lost its dreamer. It is a beautiful, lonely place, a monument to paranoia and the fleeting nature of power. The jungle surrounds the rock, a green ocean lapping at the feet of a stone island that once held a king. We travel to the Mediterranean again, to the coast of Algeria, to the city of Timgad. This was a Roman colony founded by Emperor Trajan around 100 AD. It was the perfect Roman city, a perfect square grid, with a forum, a theatre, baths and a library. It was a statement of Roman order in the chaotic landscape of North Africa. It flourished for centuries. But as the empire crumbled, the desert moved in. The Vandals sacked it, the Berbers raided it, and eventually the sand buried it. It lay hidden for 1,000 years, preserved like Pompeii, but by sand instead of ash. When excavators found it, the grid was still perfect. The ghost line here is the slow withdrawal of imperial power. When Rome retreated, the infrastructure that kept the desert at bay collapsed. The silence of Timgad is a geometric silence. The columns stand in straight rows, casting uniform shadows on the sand. It is a ghost of Rome, haunting the Sahara. It shows us that you can build the perfect city, but you cannot build it to last forever if the civilization that supports it falls. We fly north to the frozen archipelago of Svalbard, high in the Arctic Circle. We are visiting Pyramiden. This was a Soviet coal mining settlement, purchased from Sweden in 1927. It was a model communist town with a cultural palace, a swimming pool, a greenhouse that grew cucumbers in the Arctic, and the world's northernmost statue of Lenin. It was a showcase of Soviet achievement. But in 1998, with the coal mines depleting and the Russian economy in crisis, it was abandoned. The ghost line here is economic and sudden. The residents left in a hurry. In the cultural centre, the grand piano still sits on the stage. In the school, the children's drawings are still pinned to the walls. The library is full of books. The cold preserves everything. It looks like the people just went out for a walk in the snow. The silence of Pyramiden is a frozen white silence. The wind howls from the glaciers. Polar bears roam the streets. The statue of Lenin looks out over the empty fjord, presiding over a ghost town at the top of the world. It is a capsule of the USSR frozen in ice. It feels like a movie set for a film that finished shooting decades ago. The silence is amplified by the sheer isolation. You are hundreds of miles from the nearest city. It is a silence that feels final. We travel across the globe to the Pacific Ocean, to the tiny island of Malden in the Line Islands. This is a mystery of the Polynesians. When Europeans discovered the island in the 19th century, it was uninhabited, but it was covered in ruins. Stone temples, marae, paved roads leading into the sea, and house platforms. The island is harsh, dry, and has no fresh water, yet a significant population once lived here. Who were they? Why did they build megalithic paths on a desert island? And where did they go? The ghost line here is a maritime mystery. Did they destroy their environment? Did they sail away and get lost? Or was this a ceremonial stopover, never meant to be permanent? The silence of Malden Island is the silence of the sea wind hissing through the coral slabs. The birds nest in the temples. It is a ghost ship of an island, drifting in the immense blue of the Pacific, holding its secrets tight. We fly to the Middle East, to the marshes of southern Iraq, the Sumerian city of Ur. This was the city of Abraham, a major port on the Persian Gulf. The coastline has since receded. It was the capital of civilization, with the great ziggurat of Ur dominating the skyline. But the river Euphrates shifted its course. The lifeblood of the city moved away. The canals dried up. The trade stopped. The city was slowly abandoned around 500 BC. The ghost line here is hydrological. A river changed its mind, and a city died. The ziggurat was buried under the sand, turning into a shapeless hill until it was excavated. Standing on the restored steps of the ziggurat today, looking out over the desolate mudflats, you feel the age of the earth. This is the cradle of civilization, now an empty nursery. The silence is ancient, dusty and hot. It is the silence of the very beginning of history, echoing in the void. We move to the jungles of Colombia, to the lost city, Ciudad Perdida or Tayuna, built by the Tairona people around 800 AD, high in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. It is a network of tiled roads and circular terraces carved into the steep mountainside. It was a thriving political and manufacturing centre. When the Spanish arrived, the Tairona fought back, but were decimated by disease. The city was abandoned in the late 16th century and swallowed by the jungle. It remained unknown to the outside world until the 1970s. The ghost line here is resistance and retreat. The descendants of the Tairona, the Kogi people, still live in the mountains, guarding the memory of the old ones. They consider the city sacred. The silence of Ciudad Perdida is a misty cloud forest silence. The stone terraces seem to float in the vegetation. It is a secret place, hidden by the clouds, a fortress of the spirit that withdrew from the violence of the conquest. We travelled to the deserts of Yemen, to the city of Marib. This was the capital of the kingdom of Saba, Sheba. It was made rich by the great dam of Marib, an engineering marvel that irrigated the desert for 1,000 years. It was a garden of paradise, but the dam was breached multiple times and finally collapsed for good in the 6th century AD. The breakdown of the dam is mentioned in the Quran as the flood of Arim. With the water gone, the garden turned back into a desert. The people dispersed across Arabia. The city of Marib crumbled. The ghost line here is catastrophic infrastructure failure. The pillars of the Sun Temple, Awam, still stand, half buried in the sand. The silence of Marib is the silence of a broken oasis. It is a reminder that our control over nature is temporary, and when the dam breaks, the desert always wins. We fly to the north of Scotland again, to the Orkney Islands, but to the Ness of Brodgar this time, a massive Neolithic temple complex, bustling with activity for 1,000 years. And then, around 2300 BC, a huge feast was held. Hundreds of cattle were slaughtered. And then the site was deliberately destroyed and abandoned. The structures were filled with rubble. A layer of skulls was placed at the end. It was a ritual closure. The ghost line here is a ceremony, a decision to end an era. Why? Did a new religion arrive? Did the society change? We don't know. But the closure was final. The silence of the Ness is a deliberate silence. It is the silence of a book that has been read and closed. It suggests that sometimes civilizations don't fail. They just decide to stop. They change. They move on. We end this part in the modern ruins of Detroit, Michigan, the Packard automotive plant. Once the most modern factory in the world, a symbol of American industrial might. It employed 40,000 people. It churned out luxury cars and engines for war. But as the industry changed, the plant declined. It closed in 1958. Today it is a sprawling ruin of concrete and shattered glass, stretching for blocks. Trees grow on the roof. It is a cathedral of rust. The ghost line here is the Rust Belt line. The shift of global capital left this giant carcass behind. The silence of the Packard plant is a cavernous urban silence. It echoes with the phantom sounds of the assembly line. It is a modern ruin that rivals the baths of Caracalla in scale, a monument to the rise and fall of the American century. From the shifting rivers of Suma to the rusting factories of Detroit, the ghost line is always moving. It is not just a thing of the ancient past. It is happening now. It is a line drawn by water, by money, by war, by the decisions we make every day. These silent places are the mirrors of our own vulnerability. They ask us, what are we building that will last? And what will be the silence that follows us? The rustling leaves of the overgrown Packard plant in Detroit fade into the grey static of memory, and we lift ourselves from the concrete weight of the industrial age. We ascend once more, seeking the cleansing vastness of the ocean to wash away the dust of crumbled empires. We drift westward, chasing the setting sun across the endless blue of the Pacific, further and further until the continents are but distant memories. We are heading to the most isolated point of inhabited land on the planet, Rapa Nui, Easter Island. Here the ghost line is not a metaphor. It is a physical presence carved into the volcanic tuff. We stand in the quarry of Rano Raraku. This is the womb of the Moai, the giant stone ancestors. But it is also their graveyard. Scattered across the slopes are nearly 400 unfinished statues. Some are half-carved, emerging from the bedrock, like sleepers trying to wake from a nightmare. Others are standing upright, buried to their chests in the soil, waiting for the transport teams that never arrived. The silence here is profound and bewildering. It is the silence of a factory floor where the whistle blew and everyone walked out, never to return. Tools, the stone toki, were found dropped beside the statues. It wasn't a slow decline over centuries. It feels like a sudden interruption, a crisis of faith, a civil war, a collapse of the ecosystem that made moving these giants impossible. Walk among the silent heads. They stare with hollow eyes at the crater lake, or out towards the ocean. They are the ultimate symbol of the ghost line. The society that built them reached a peak of obsession, pouring all their energy into these stone effigies until the wood ran out, the soil eroded, and the system snapped. The silence of Rano Raraku is a heavy, tragic silence. It is the silence of ambition hitting the hard wall of reality. Yet there is peace here too. The struggle is over. The frantic work has ceased. The statues are slowly sinking back into the earth that birthed them, returning to the anonymity of the rock. It is a reminder that even our most monumental efforts will eventually rest, that the earth has a patience that outlasts all our urgency. We drift from the land to the sea itself. We are hovering over the Atlantic Ocean on a calm day in December 1872. We are looking at a ship, a brigantine named the Mary Celeste. She is sailing under partial sail, moving erratically but safely through the swells. We board the ship. The silence here is the most unsettling of all. It is the silence of a vessel that is alive but empty. We drift from the land to the sea itself. We are hovering over the Atlantic Ocean on a calm day in December 1872. We are looking at a ship, a brigantine named the Mary Celeste. She is sailing under partial sail, moving erratically but safely through the swells. We board the ship. The silence here is the most unsettling of all. It is the silence of a vessel that is alive but empty. There is no one at the wheel. The deck is deserted. We go below. The crew's quarters are dry. The captain's cabin is orderly. There are stories that breakfast was left on the table. Tea still warm, though these are myths. But the reality is just as haunting. The ship was seaworthy. There was plenty of food and water. The cargo of alcohol was largely intact. But the 10 people on board, the captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and the crew, were gone. The single lifeboat was missing. What happened? A seaquake, a fear of explosion from the cargo fumes, a sudden madness. They abandoned a perfectly good ship in the middle of the ocean, jumping into a small boat to vanish into the oblivion of the sea. The Mary Celeste sailed on like a ghost, a Flying Dutchman of the 19th century, standing in the empty cabin, hearing the creak of the timbers and the slap of the water against the hull. You feel the abruptness of the void. The ghost line here is the railing of the ship. On one side, safety, wood, warmth. On the other, the abyssal deep. They cross that line in a moment of panic, leaving their floating home to wander the ocean alone. The silence of the Mary Celeste is a drifting silence, a question mark painted on the waves that has never been answered. It asks us, how thin is the line between safety and disappearance? We travel back in time, deep into the Neolithic, to the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey. We return to Göbekli Tepe. We visited it as a place of giants, but now we see it as a place of abandonment. This was the first temple, the 0 point of religion. For thousands of years, hunter-gatherers gathered here to erect massive T-shaped pillars. And then, around 8000 BC, they did something inexplicable. They didn't just leave. They buried it. They spent immense effort hauling tons of earth and rubble to cover the stone circles, sealing them perfectly. They created an artificial hill to hide their gods. Why? Did the old religion become taboo? Did they fear the power of the stones? Or was it a ritual closure, a way of putting the temple to sleep? The ghost line here is an act of burial. It was a deliberate erasure. The silence of Göbekli Tepe is a muffled silence, a silence protected by 6 meters of soil. It is the silence of a time capsule, a message sent to the future by a people who wanted to move on. They realized that to build the new world of agriculture, they had to bury the old world of the hunt. They closed the door on the Garden of Eden and walked away into history. And now we pull back. We lift our gaze from the buried temples and the drifting ships and the silent cities. We ascend to that high, quiet place in the atmosphere where the earth is just a glowing curve in the darkness. We see the planet spinning slowly, a blue marble wrapped in clouds. From up here, the ghost lines are not scars, they are part of the pattern. We see the lights of humanity flickering on and off. Cities rise like constellations, burn brightly for a few centuries or millennia, and then fade away, replaced by new lights elsewhere. It is the rhythm of the world. Inhale, exhale, rise, fall, build, abandon. We are often afraid of the silence, of the empty room, of the ruin. We see it as failure, but from this height we see it as rest. The earth needs to sleep too. The cities of the Maya were swallowed by the jungle so the soil could recover. The streets of Pompeii were buried so the history could be preserved. The abandonment is not an end. It is a pause, a deep breath before the next verse of the song. The ghost line is simply the horizon of time. We are all walking towards it. One day our own cities will be silent. The wind will blow through the canyons of New York and the glass towers of Dubai. The ivy will climb the steel and the rust will eat the iron. And this is not a terrifying thought. It is a peaceful one. It means that the burden of maintaining this complex, noisy, frantic machine will eventually be lifted. It means that the noise will stop. The deadlines will dissolve. The urgency will fade. The silence will return, healing and green and cool. Feel that silence beginning to settle on you now. The journey is over. We have walked the empty streets of the world, and now we return to the sanctuary of your own rest. Imagine that your body is a city. For the last 16 hours it has been bustling with activity, thoughts rushing like traffic, muscles working like machinery, nerves firing like the grid. But now the sun has set. The ghost line of the night is here. It is time to evacuate the city of the day. Visualize the lights turning off in the windows of your mind. One by one, the rooms go dark. The offices of planning and worrying are closed. The factories of tension are shutting down. The streets of your limbs are emptying out, becoming heavy and still. The traffic of your thoughts is thinning, fewer and fewer cars, until the road is quiet. You are retreating to the citadel, to the safe inner fortress of sleep. Imagine you are entering a vast, ancient library carved into the living rock. This is the archive of silence. The walls are lined with the stories of all the civilizations that have ever been. They are resting here on the shelves of eternity. The air is cool and smells of old paper and stone dust. There is a comfortable chair waiting for you in the centre of the room, bathed in a soft amber light. Sit down. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the chair, supported by the solid ground. You are safe here. The door is locked. The storm of history is outside, blowing across the ruins. But inside, it is still. You are surrounded by the wisdom of the vanished. They tell you that it is okay to let go. It is okay to stop. It is okay to leave the tools unfinished, the table unset, the sentence incomplete. The world will wait. The stones will wait. Let the heaviness of the stone enter your bones. Your legs are becoming heavy as the pillars of Karnak. Your arms are resting like the fallen statues of Rapa Nui. Your head is heavy, sinking into the pillow like a stone sinking into the soft sand of the ocean floor. Down, down, into the quiet dark. The ghost line is crossing over you now. You are crossing from the world of noise into the world of silence, from the world of doing into the world of being. You are drifting like the Mary Celeste, sailing smoothly on a calm black sea, with no one at the wheel, guided only by the currents of the deep. There is nothing to steer. There is nothing to navigate. The ocean of sleep has you. Listen to the silence. It is not empty. It is full of peace. It is the sound of the universe breathing. It is the sound of the dust settling in an empty room. It is the sound of the snow falling on a deserted street. It is the lullaby of the end of things, promising a new beginning when the morning comes. But for now, there is only the night. There is only the quiet. There is only the rest. Sleep now amidst the ruins of the day. Sleep now in the safety of the stone. Sleep now and let the ghost line carry you into the dark. Good night.